Galileo was quite controversial, of course, in his time because he was claiming that something that we all could see with our own eyes wasn't true. We could all see that the Earth doesn't move and that the sun and moon and stars go around the Earth, and we believed that as a race for about 2,000 years. And Galileo was saying that your eyes are lying to you. The Earth actually moves and it's not the center of the universe. And he was put under house arrest for it. We don't like to be told that our senses aren't telling us the truth. And then Galileo took it another step. He said it's not just that our senses are lying about the movement of the Earth. He said that he thought that tastes, odors, colors, and so on reside in consciousness. Hence, if the living creature were removed, all these properties, these qualities would be utterly annihilated. That's almost a direct quote in the translation. So he was saying that our senses are also making up the tastes, odors, and colors that we experience. They're not properties of an objective reality. They're actually properties of our senses that they're fabricating. And by objective reality in this case, I'm going to use that term in a very specific way. By objective reality, I mean what most physicists would mean, and that is that something is objectively real if it would continue to exist even if there were no creatures to perceive it. So the standard story, for example, is that the moon existed before there was any life on Earth, and perhaps before there was any life in the universe. But it still existed. Its existence does not depend on the perceptions of any creatures. And so that's the sense in which I'll talk about objective reality. And what Galileo was saying was that colors, odors, tastes, and so on are not real in that sense of objective reality. They are real in a different sense. They're real experiences. And so I'll talk about real experiences. So your headache is a real experience, even though it could not exist without you perceiving it. So it exists in a different way than the objective reality that physicists talk about. So Galileo was quite brave and quite out of the box in his thinking by saying not only the Earth and its movement, but even colors, tastes, and odors are perceptual constructions. But he wouldn't go the next step. He wouldn't say that shapes and mass and velocities of objects and space and time themselves are constructions. He thought that those were objectively real. So the shape of the moon, the position of the moon, is an objectively real thing, including its mass and its velocities. So this is a distinction that was later called the primary and secondary qualities distinction by John Locke. Primary qualities are things like position, mass, shape, and so forth. These are presumed to exist even if no creature observes them, whereas colors and odors and tastes are secondary qualities that are sort of mostly the contribution of our senses. And in brief, what I'm saying is we need to take the next step beyond what Galileo said. It's not just tastes, odors, and colors that are the fabrications of our senses and are not objectively real. It's rather that space-time itself and everything within space-time, objects, the sun, the moon, electrons, quarks, their shapes, if objects have shapes, their masses, their velocities, all of these physical properties are also our constructions. And I've come to that conclusion. It was a bit of a shock to me. We always assume that our senses are telling us the truth. So it was quite a stunning shock to me when I realized that maybe we needed to take a step beyond Galileo on this. And the reason I'm saying this is because of evolution by natural selection. Most of my colleagues in the cognitive and neurosciences assume that our senses tell us the truths that we need to survive, that seeing reality accurately will make you more fit. And I would say that that makes perfect sense. You know, the argument is that those of our ancestors who saw reality more accurately had a competitive advantage over those who saw it less accurately in the basic activities of life, like feeding, fighting, fleeing, and mating. And because they had a competitive advantage, they were more likely to pass on their genes, which coded for the accurate perceptions. And so after thousands of generations of that, we can be quite confident that we see reality as it is. Of course, not all of reality. No one claims that our senses exhaustively tell us all the truths about objective reality. But from an evolutionary point of view, the idea is we see those aspects of reality accurately that we need to survive. And so when we see space and time, we see physical objects with their shapes and motions and so forth, we're seeing truths, objective truths, truths about objects that would exist even if no creature were there to perceive them. That's the standard view. And it seems intuitively plausible. The argument that I just gave is actually in the textbooks in my field. But it turns out that we don't have to just deal with plausibility here. Evolution by natural selection is a mathematically precise theory. There is the field of evolutionary game theory that was established in the 1970s by John Maynard Smith and has flourished. It's now a very advanced and very interesting mathematically precise field. It unites Darwinian evolution by natural selection with the tools of game theory, and it's very, very powerful. So we don't have to guess or wave our hands anymore. We can actually run simulations and prove theorems about the effects of natural selection on our senses. We can ask a technical question. Does natural selection favor organisms with sensory systems that tell them truths about reality, objective reality? It's a clean technical question. And it turns out there's a clean technical answer that comes from evolution, and it's quite surprising. I first started this about 12 years ago with a couple of graduate students of mine, Justin Mark and Brian Marion. We ran hundreds of thousands of evolutionary game simulations in random worlds with resources and creatures that had to forage for these resources. And we played God. Some of the creatures got to see the truth, others didn't. And the ones that didn't, we had them just perceive the fitness payoffs. And we can talk a little bit about fitness payoffs a little bit later. That's a key notion in evolution. And what we found was, in the simulations, organisms that saw the truth never outcompeted, never outperformed creatures in our simulations that saw none of the truth and were just perceiving the fitness payoffs. So that gave me some confidence that maybe there was a theorem here. And so I proposed a theorem to a very talented mathematician named Chetan Prakash, with whom I've worked for many years. Chetan and I discussed it, worked on it, and Chetan brought it home. He proved the theorem. An organism that sees reality as it is never more fit than an organism of equal complexity that sees none of reality and is just tuned to the fitness payoffs. Translated, that means if you see the truth, you'll go extinct. The question is, of course, what are fitness payoffs and what's going on there? And it's a technical term in game theory. The payoffs are what sort of drive the game. But I think an analogy can help. Think of life as like a video game. In a video game, you have to, in many video games, you have to try to grab as many points as quickly as you can at the level that you're at. And if you get enough points in the minimal time, you might get to the next level. If you don't, you die, and you have to put in some more money or start over. And the idea is that life is like that. It's like a video game, but instead of the points in a game, we have fitness payoffs. Getting the right kind of food, high quality food, not eating poisonous things, breathing the right kind of air, finding the right mates, and so forth. These are all fitness payoffs that we can get. And if we get more fitness payoffs than the competition, we don't have to get, it's not like getting millions of fitness payoffs. You just have to do a little bit better than the competition. Then you have a better chance of passing on your genes that code for your strategies for getting fitness payoffs. So you don't go to the next level like in a video game, but your genes and your offspring go to the next level. And so that's informally the idea of fitness payoffs. They're what drive success or failure in evolution and life. And what we discovered was two things. First, that fitness payoffs themselves destroy information about the structure of the world. It's truly stunning. Fitness payoffs depend on the state of the world, and I can give you an example. So, what is the fitness payoff of, say, I like this example of a T-bone steak. Well, for a hungry lion looking to eat, that T-bone steak offers a lot of fitness payoffs. It'll help it to stay alive and be strong. For that same lion that's well-fed and looking to mate, the T-bone steak offers no fitness payoffs. And for a cow, in any state, a T-bone steak is not a good thing. So the payoffs depend on objective reality, whatever that might be, whatever the state of the world might be, also on the organism, like lion versus cow, its state, hungry versus fed, and its action, eating versus mating, for example. So fitness payoffs, as you can see, are complicated functions. They depend on the state of the world, whatever the world might be, but also on the organism, its state, and its action. And if we fix an organism, state, and action, then fitness payoffs are functions from the world, whatever the world might be, into a set of payoff values, say from 1 to M fitness payoff values, where 1 means you're dead, M means you're getting the most you could possibly get. And what we've discovered is that function, those fitness functions, almost surely destroy information about the structure of the world. I can give you a concrete example of what I mean by that. So suppose, and by the way, when I said that, I don't need to know anything about the world. I don't need to propose I know anything what reality is. These theorems hold anyway. That's the nice thing about the mathematics. You might say, well, how could you prove such a theorem unless you know what the world is? It turns out you can. These theorems hold regardless of what the world is.